Hi, everyone. Welcome to our new series called Sexpectations, Untangling Gender Norms and Rape Culture. My name is Rachel Craig. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am the program coordinator here with the Rutgers, New York Office for Violence Prevention and Victim Assistance. And our very first guest is Danielle Francois, and I will let them introduce themselves.
Hi, thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this discussion today. I'm Danielle Francois. I'm the Health and Outreach Coordinator at the Essex County Family Justice Center. I've been working in the field of gender-based violence for about 10 years, so I'm really excited.
We are so thrilled to have you and all of your wealth of knowledge that you're bringing to us and our students today. So if you'd like, could you just tell us a little bit about Essex Family Justice Center, and then we will sort of get into it.
Sure, yeah. So the Essex County Family Justice Center is actually based off of a national model. So there's multiple family justice centers throughout the country and also throughout the state. The Essex County Family Justice Center has been the first one to open in New Jersey. The purpose of a family justice center is to provide co-located services for survivors of domestic violence. When we think about somebody who's experiencing domestic violence and they're trying to get help, it can be really difficult sometimes to navigate the resources, what they have to do, where they can go for safety. And we found that the more that a survivor feels supported, and the less that they have to travel around literally to, different places, to different organizations, they are more likely to move forward in their healing journey and leave the relationship safely. So what we do is we provide as many services as possible under one roof so that the survivor doesn't have to go from place to place. They just come see us and they get their needs met there.
That's great. We'll definitely be sharing more information about Essex Family Justice Center when we post this and go through it, so you will know how to contact the wonderful people over there. And so we're wrapping up right now as we're recording this, October, which is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So for our first conversation today, we did really want to focus on, defining domestic and partner violence and what the cycle of violence looks like for people in unhealthy or abusive relationships, and then what that can look like, on the outside. And so Danielle's going to be able to help us kind of navigate through that conversation. First, I just wanted to talk briefly and sort of lay the foundation for how we understand domestic and partner violence. So domestic violence is a pattern of unhealthy behaviors that are used to gain and maintain power and control. And that's really the root of all interpersonal violence, and really what we drill down and focus on when we're talking about interpersonal violence. So within that power and control, a lot of people might think about, physical violence as that means to gain that power and control. But what we know is that there are a lot of other ways that abuse presents itself within partner violence and domestic violence. So it is not just physical violence. There are a lot of other things that people experience and that create more barriers, which we'll talk about a little bit later, to, being safe and potentially leaving that relationship. So domestic violence is kind of seen in cycles, oftentimes, beginning with what's called this honeymoon phase. That will oftentimes be how a relationship starts. And then we progress through the cycle, and then we move into the tension building phase, which is where people might begin to notice those red flags. And I think we might center our conversation kind of around that piece, that tension building phase, where, survivors may reflect and say, oh, I noticed those red flags building in that phase. Or people, outside of the relationship may say they notice some things happening within that tension building phase. But sometimes it's kind of hard to recognize what is happening. This is where survivors sometimes describe the feeling of walking on eggshells, or kind of knowing that something is going to happen, but not necessarily knowing what it is, or, not being able to do anything right. Everything is kind of a problem. And then after that tension building phase, which can last a week, it could last months, we move into the kind of acute explosion phase, which is when there is an acute experience of violence. This is usually the shortest phase. And so after that, we kind of move back into the honeymoon period. This could either be, apologies, it could be denial and blaming, but either way, we're moving out of the acute explosion phase, back into a time where things are slightly more settled, and then the cycle kind of keeps going around, typically with an escalation in those power and control tactics. So today, like I said, I think we're going to focus on some elements that may show up in that tension building phase, those behaviors that come up for survivors to recognize, but also for people kind of on the outside looking in, what are red flags, things of that nature. So with all that to say, Danielle, would you mind sharing, from your perspective, how people outside of a relationship may notice, those early warning signs, how they can pinpoint someone within those earlier stages?
Yeah, thank you. So when we're looking at, or like when we are with somebody, right, if a friend or family member, I think a really good way to pick up on some of these early warning signs is just to note their behavior, right? Chances are you know this person pretty well, right? So relative or close friends, they're in a new relationship. I think sometimes it's like exciting to be in a new relationship, so we spend a lot of time with this new person. But I think if that kind of carries on a little bit longer than normal, like past 3 months, this like honeymoon, everything's perfect. We're absolutely falling in love with each other. If it begins to turn more like, well, I really should be like spending time with that partner tonight. I can't really go out. Or they say things like, I'm not allowed to do something, right? If you have like a standing hangout every Saturday, right? You and your friend, and then all of a sudden, so and so doesn't really want me hanging out. Saturday they really want to spend time with me. I'm not allowed to do this. They get jealous when I go somewhere or I wear something specific, right? It's like this in a violent relationship or in an abusive relationship, there's a lot of control. So if you're seeing signs where your friend is, they don't have permission to do something anymore that they normally did, right? Also, their behavior, their mood, right? If they're acting a little depressed, if they're feeling a little down, if they start to pull away from you, also. Another key component of a violent relationship is isolation. These things thrive in isolation, right? The abusive partner, the person that's causing harm, wants to take that person away from their loved ones, right? Their friends and their family. So if you're not seeing them that often, if they seem a little withdrawn, I think those are really good indicators that maybe not abuse is happening, but something to ask about. Hey, what's going on? I haven't seen you in a while. Hey, you said that so and so doesn't allow you to dress a certain way anymore. Like, what's going on with that? It's like it's a cue for you to check in with your friend or your family member.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really helpful, because I know a lot of people sometimes see some of those behaviors, especially that isolation piece in the beginning, and it sort of becomes a wall between, friends oftentimes, right? Of, oh, they're just in that honeymoon phase with their new partner. They want to spend all their time with them. They don't have enough time for me anymore. So I'm not going to try, right? When oftentimes it is, like you said, that kind of point where it's a perfect time to check in rather than sort of pull away on that relationship. Absolutely. Thank you. So those same observations that you mentioned, those same kind of behaviors that maybe friends or loved ones can pick up on, and as an invitation to check in, how could those kind of perspective shifts if friends and family have, like a positive relationship, or a positive understanding of the relationship, right? They see, the abusive partner or the person potentially causing harm. Maybe they're an upstanding member of their community. Maybe they've known them for a really long time, their family, friends, lots of these things. How does that change? And the same thing, kind of the flip side, right? If the partner is being isolated, or there are these cues that you might want to check in, and then the person who may be experiencing harm, the survivor, is kind of denying all of that behavior.
Yeah, so I want to like highlight something that you pointed out just now, is that, what happens if this person is like an upstanding member of society? Oftentimes they are, right?
Mhm.
Oftentimes for people that will cause harm or do cause harm in their relationships, they're people of power, they're people of status. And so I just want to put that out there, right? That it's sometimes that creates its own barrier. And I think we will talk about barriers a little later, that kind of creates its own barrier to reaching out to the survivor. Um, but how these perspectives can shift if friends or family members have like a more positive view of either the partner or the relationship. It can be difficult for them to believe that abuse is happening, and not because of anything, malicious against the survivor or the person that's coming to them. I think naturally our first response to something, especially if we know that person pretty well, like if it's a friend or, your mutual friend or even a family member, our first reaction is like, I would never associate with somebody that could harm somebody else. So that I can't be, right? It's kind of like a self-protective thing that we automatically do. And so we have to be mindful of that when we do it. Um, so it might create more isolation and further, drive a wedge between you and the survivor. Because if you're having a positive view of the person, you're having a positive view of the relationship, you don't want to believe that that's happening. And you go, I don't believe you. Or, oh, well, maybe something happened that day at work. They were
Mhm.
stressed, or like, were you guys fighting? Like what happened, right? You kind of like, you're automatically kind of putting the onus back on the survivor to be like, you must have contributed to this somehow, right? Because whatever. So it creates this sense for the survivor that like I can't come talk to this person because they're not going to believe me, right? So it's really hard for the friends and loved ones to believe that abuse is happening. Um, Again, if the partner has isolated the survivor um, enough where the survivor is, and part of surviving the abuse as a survivor is minimizing the abuse,
Right.
right? We have to do that in order to kind of get through. And so minimization is incredibly difficult and really challenging to break through. And so if you are sensing something and you approach your loved one, say, hey, what's going on? You say, oh no, it's fine, it's fine. We want to be careful not to push them,
Mhm.
right? Because again, they might go further away from us. So we can say things like, all right, if, I believe you, but, these are my concerns. This is what I've been observing. And so I am concerned. I just want you to be safe. Um, I'm here for you. Um, I think those are really important things to keep in mind. So, these issues create their own barriers, right? But there are ways around it.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for kind of highlighting that, because partner violence is rooted in power and control, it is often, caused by people who already have some kind of power, in society, in their community, whatever that
Mhm.
may be. That definitely plays a really key role in that, and then can impact how, survivors are able to get support once they do
Yeah.
disclose. I think that's really important. And the other thing you mentioned as well right, when survivors may be minimizing their experience, it can, cause a divide, but definitely, expressing that concern, just like naming it, and giving them the space, because one of the things we do always talk about too is that with that cycle of violence that we were talking about, survivors know that cycle the best.
Right.
They know when is safe for them, when is not safe for them. And so kind of pushing against that could be confusing or potentially even, harmful or dangerous to the survivor. So we've mentioned barriers quite a few times. So could you just outline maybe like what barriers are, or what are some barriers for survivors who recognize that cycle of violence and want to leave a relationship?
Yeah. I feel like there are countless, countless barriers. But some of the things that I think of immediately is safety, or fear. So when somebody leaves an abusive relationship, the risk of physical violence, homicide to themselves, to other people, their loved ones, increases.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a real barrier. Like you pointed out just now, the survivor is the expert in their relationship, right? So they know when safe to leave, when it's not safe to leave. They know that, my partner works overnights, Thursday through Sunday, and that's when I'm going to leave, right? So that's a real barrier. I would say financial as well. Uh, New Jersey is very expensive to live in, right? Rent is steadily increasing. And so if there's not affordable housing, if somebody doesn't have access to affordable housing, they are more likely to stay and remain in a relationship, especially if they're getting financial support from the abusive partner.
Mm-hmm.
And, I say financial support as like almost sounding positive, but really it could look like, that's even its own form of abuse, right? Financial control, not having access to your own money, not having access to your bank account, or your credit has been destroyed by your partner, right? So you like don't have access to, financial sustainability, right? Undocumented folks, right? Undocumented people don't have the same access that naturalized citizens do to certain services. That is also a barrier. With that, there could be a language barrier as well.
Mm-hmm.
Pets. I'm a pet owner. If I was in an abusive relationship and my partner was threatening to harm my pet if I left, that would be definitely a consideration that I would take when I was leaving, right? And then unfortunately, there are a lot of circumstances where people have tried to leave, or they have taken the steps, they've done all the right things, but our system has failed them in a certain way, right? So if they filed a restraining order, if they filed a police report, but the restraining order wasn't served, or the restraining order was just constantly being violated, they can start to feel a little hopeless about their situation, right? Like, why am I going to do another restraining order? Why am I going to go file another police report? They didn't believe me last time. The judge dismissed the restraining order. They were never served, right? Why is this situation, or why is this time going to be any different than last time? Right. So it's kind of like a self-defeating sort of, it's not really even self-defeating. It's stuff beyond their control, right? But they start to think really, start to feel really hopeless about their situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, there's countless barriers, and so many of them are personal, but everything you shared, a lot of it is systemic. It's the systems that we interact with and how they kind of reciprocate that support or not. And so I think the support from friends and loved ones becomes all the more important, because
Right.
that is, an area that we can control, as we're hoping to make, those systemic changes. And so oftentimes we also know that, law enforcement is likely not the first place a survivor is going. They may, first disclose to a friend or a loved one or someone closer and more trusted in their life. So our responses and the way that we offer support can be really impactful in those situations. So could you just share, how can friends, family, loved ones approach a survivor about their concerns if they're noticing these things, and then support them, during their relationship or after leaving a relationship?
Yeah, I think, this is always a question that comes up when we're talking about a violent relationship or domestic violence in general, is this conversation around like what's going on and how can I help? And sometimes it can be a little bit more judgmental where we can kind of ask, why don't they just leave? Like, I don't get it. And so I encourage everybody who's watching, who's listening, to notice if you do that. No judgment, obviously, but try to flip that from why don't they just leave to like what's keeping them from leaving, right? Like you said, there's so many systemic barriers out there. So if you know somebody, if you are, in a relationship with somebody, friends or a family, and you're picking up on these red flags, or you just like go with your gut too, right? Like if something just isn't adding up, then you can say that to the person, with kindness. Always lead with kindness and empathy and compassion, right? You don't want to take any more control away from them because they've gotten that from their partner, right? So if they don't disclose to you first and you approach them about your concerns, yeah, lead with empathy, lead with compassion, express these concerns, be genuine with them and say, hey, I've noticed this and I don't like how they talk to you. I didn't like that one interaction that I saw. Or I didn't feel comfortable when you said that they do this, right? Or remember when you told me that they hit you, like I don't like that. um I'm concerned for you. I'm concerned for your safety. I'm afraid that this might escalate more, right? How are you feeling about it? What's going on with you, right? Do you want to talk to somebody? And like, they might feel overwhelmed, they might not know, right? And they might easily dismiss it. No, it's fine, don't worry about it. Okay, fine. If you don't want to talk about it now, so know that I am here for you when you're ready, right? And just leave it at that. If they approach, yeah, if they're like, okay, yeah, let's talk about this, I would suggest and encourage everybody to know your own limits, right? You don't have to be an expert in this, right? There's a lot of people out there that can help your loved one. So, offer that to them. Okay, do you want to call a hotline? Do you want me to sit with you? Do you want me to do you want to use my phone or my computer so that like your partner isn't tracking like your search history for like resources, right? Um, and just, if they are like, yeah, okay, let's do this, let's move forward. Okay, I'm going to get a restraining order, I'm going to go to shelter, whatever it is, right? And then they back out of it, they start to get like cold feet, they start to second guess themselves because that's what like the mental abuse has like done to them. They're like, well, maybe it is my fault, right? Like maybe it's not that bad, right?
Right.
Um, if they start to do that and they go back to the relationship or they stay in the relationship, as much as you like want them to leave, as much as you feel frustrated, I like please don't express that to them because again, it's going to push them away,
Mm.
right? We want to be like, okay, you're not ready yet. Okay, but what can we do in the meantime, right? Let's talk to an advocate so at least you can stay safe, right? At least you know what to do when you are ready to leave. Um, and not everybody has a place to leave too, like to go to when they leave. So um if you are a kind person that wants to offer your space to this person, again, know your limits, right? Like the physical harm, that risk increases, and we want to keep everybody safe, right? Um, and yeah, if somebody hasn't disclosed or like has disclosed rather, just believe them, right?
Mhm.
Believe that what they're saying. That's number one.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It really is And it sounds like just, creating that space, the timeline might not look exactly how it looks in your head as someone outside of the relationship of like, well, you need to leave now. And we're going to be in solution mode and we're going to kind of do X, Y, and Z, which I do think a lot of people fall into. And just because they want to keep their friend or their loved one safe. But yeah, it sounds like definitely creating that environment of, I'm here for you when you're ready, and I know what I can offer. I know my limits. And I know, how to support you if need be. With all that to say, what we have you here, and you do provide such an amazing resource to those survivors who, are actively seeking that support. So could you tell us, just a little bit about your services, right? Like who can benefit from coming to Essex County Family Justice Center? If someone discloses an experience of interpersonal violence, either to you or to a friend, and they get connected to services, what does that process look like? What do you offer? What are those next steps, sort of?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we provide services for any self-disclosed survivor living in Essex who is older than 18. Unfortunately, that would be a minor, and so that would be like a whole other separate, resource. And so, yeah, anybody who is self-disclosed living in Essex can benefit from our services. If somebody gets connected from us in some way, the steps are to so we either provide services over the phone, remotely, or in person. So we're a hybrid. We find that a lot of people, we're trying to meet as many people where they're at, right? Some people aren't, it's not accessible for them to come to the office. So we do offer appointments over the phone as well. So the first step would be to complete an intake where we just get demographic information, get a little bit of history about what's going on. We do a safety planning. We do a safety planning tool called the danger assessment. It's rather long in person. Over the phone, we were able to shorten it to 5 questions. And it's really just to give us a sense of what's going on in the relationship, what kind of experiences have been, what types of things have been going on in the relationship. So we ask a series of questions, gauging the level of potential lethality, essentially, of the relationship. That gives us information, but then it also helps safety plan with the survivor. So that they can feel, right? They can feel in control. They can get that autonomy back, try to figure out what's their next step, right? Because you pointed out, not everyone's ready to leave that minute that they decide, okay, I'm going to call the police. Okay, I'm going to call, or I'm going to go to this organization. They might just be like information gathering, right? And so the next step from the intake and the danger assessment is something called what we call a needs list. So we have a list of all of our services or the things that we can offer or help connect you with, and you tell us what you're there for, right? We're never going to force anything on you. We're never going to say, yeah, you really should probably do X, Y, and Z though, right? Based on what you're telling me. Or no, we don't want to do that, right? Like we're going to do this instead. We try to be as trauma informed and survivor centered as possible. And so what that means is having the survivor tell us what they're there for. And that's what we do. We connect the survivor with the appropriate advocates or the appropriate partner organizations. And yeah, and so the person can come to us once, they can come to us multiple times. Everything is free. So again, we try to be as accessible as possible.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And so, if people watching want to get involved, with your work, with your agency, or just kind of want to help live out that mission in their lives day to day, are there any ways that people can do that?
Yeah. So, I part of my role at the Family Justice Center is I coordinate a group of survivors who are past the healing stage. They are not, unsafe anymore. They've established their safety, and they're ready to give back. They want to help other survivors get connected. They want to help the community know who we are and where we, can be accessed. So if you are a survivor of domestic violence and you feel like you are ready and you want to volunteer, we do like a lot of outreach events. We do a lot of advocacy and helping, community members get connected with us. We are a nonprofit, so, we always are looking for monetary support so that we can keep our services going. Also, we are direct services. So we are seeing survivors directly. And another way that can help is by donating gift cards, like food cards, right? ShopRite cards, Target cards, right? Like, so that we can give to survivors who come see us, that they can get their needs, their basic needs met. And yeah, I think just overall, right? Like, not just our organization, but for this issue more broadly,
Mm-hmm.
I think, having these conversations, right? Listening to these conversations and not being afraid of this. Um, Understanding your own biases perhaps around this topic. Um, Calling people out, calling people in, right? When you are hearing or seeing harmful behavior, of course, maintaining your own safety. But, if your friend is, I don't know, sharing a photo of his girlfriend or, their partner, they're like nude, be like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, that's not cool. Like just like little things like that to try to change our cultural perspective and idea of how women and how queer people are treated in our society, right? Because that's really what perpetuates gender-based violence, is this idea that one group can control and overpower another group that doesn't really kind of fit their own mold. And unfortunately, that's oftentimes women and queer people, right? So kind of calling these things out as you see them. Um, Pay attention to legislation that's going on, that's being passed in the state. Try to vote and try to support people and lawmakers who are, supporting these laws that help survivors, like affordable housing or the Violence Against Women Act, right? Just like try to be active and try to be aware, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So much great stuff. I know a lot of people do ask, how to get involved. And I think those are some really amazing ways that we can, work to live up to this mission and really embody, right? Like Domestic Violence Awareness Month, that's what we're talking about. And what does it mean to go a step further than just like knowing that it exists, which is really great. And we do need to continue these conversations and help destigmatize these conversations and those experiences. But, how can you continue moving forward with that? So thank you. Before we, wrap up, is there any other information you want to share about your agency? We will be including how to reach you, social media, all that good stuff. But is there anything you would like to share?
No, just our website, EssexCountyFJC.org. We do have a donation page. We also have our Instagram, our Facebook. We also work closely with the hotline and the shelter. So I know that you'll be able to provide those numbers at the end, but uh, just I hope that people learn something from this and feel that they have more options available to them if they're either experiencing violence or they know someone who is. I think just as a collective effort, we just need to believe survivors,
Mhm.
continue to believe survivors, and continue to find ways to support them.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you so much for that work that you're doing, that Morse Essex Family Justice Center is doing. And thank you for kind of sharing all of that knowledge with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.